Whenever I see a film spending 2 to 3 hours where basically nothing happens at all, I literally want to get up out of my seat and start shouting at the characters because there's nothing I hate more than a story that doesn't know what it wants to say. Wait a second, how long are the Avatar movies? What do you mean they're getting longer? Thankfully, Up managed to do something in 4 minutes that other films couldn't achieve within 4 hours. Okay, technically if you want to include all the intro and payoffs, then maybe it's around 14 minutes, but still. It's likely you've seen the clips outside of even watching the full film, but if you haven't, these scenes illustrate some of the best emotional storytelling that I've ever seen, and the kicker is, not a single word was spoken in them. How did a simple love story that happened years before the current events of the movie manage to do this? And what does it really take to create a poignant, characterizing story that still resonates with its audience decades in the future? Just to be clear, the entire movie isn't a silent film or anything, but the main scene I'm talking about is completely devoid of dialogue. To make sure everything gets framed in regards to these scenes correctly, I'm going to split the movie into sections so we can address each piece individually and how they accentuate Carl and Ellie's story, Carl being our main character and Ellie his now deceased wife. First, the prologue, where we're introduced to child Carl and Ellie and how they first met. Next, the famous 4 minutes of cinematic beauty, which I'll be referring to as the married life clip, where we see the entire journey of Carl and Ellie's marriage. Then the majority of the actual movie, or what I like to call the part that I almost completely forgot about because it was all a contrived reason to represent Carl's internal struggle to accept his wife's death anyways. Okay, fine. Better known as the main story where Carl attaches balloons to his house in order to finally honor his promise to take Ellie to Paradise Falls, Peru, and place their home in the spot that she had always dreamed about going. And finally, the climax/resolution, which I'm grouping together because all the plotlines are basically resolved through the same choices, and that in itself lends to the beauty of the overall story. I know I just said I was going to separate these sections out, but we need to talk about the prologue in context with the married life clip. The prologue is actually quite short and sweet, but I wanted to distinctly call this part out and then add it in with the married life clip in order to discuss a key aspect of why the first part of the movie works so well. In essence, these two sections make up exactly 11 minutes of the start of the film and are a whole and complete story in and of itself. Carl as a kid is shown watching a documentary about Charles Muntz, an adventurer he admires, but who disappears to Paradise Falls after being cast out by the National Explorer Society in order to prove the bird skeleton he discovers was a real creature, not just a fabrication. On his way home, he encounters Ellie, who also idolizes Muntz and the spirit of adventure motto he embodies. Bonding over their shared interests, Ellie forces Carl to promise to take them to Paradise Falls one day, keeping a section of her adventure book blank for all the adventures she plans on having once she is there. This is the promise that Carl attempts to make good on in the main section of the film. Jump cut to the 4 wordless minutes that made Up a truly historic watch. To preface, the fact that the clip has no dialogue would at first seem like a disadvantage, but here, it significantly improves our understanding of their relationship, as when we lose one of our senses, we're being told to interpret the movie using our others instead. We see through the visual elements and the not so subtle imagery that after Carl and Ellie are newly married and they move into the abandoned home where they first met and fix it up, they begin to build a new, happy life together. Pixar did an amazing job using just these scenes to establish their love for one another, from the way Ellie puts her handprint next to Carl's after he mistakenly leaves his hand on the mailbox, to her running up the hill in excitement and waiting patiently at the top for Carl to catch up, hands on her hips teasingly. Ellie is painted as the energetic one, full of life and adventure, and bringing light into Carl's life with her imagination. Carl, on the other hand, is just happy to be around her, and is a rock for her to hold on to, and they share a deep and obvious bond. This dynamic was the cornerstone of their relationship, and gives us a window into how they managed to achieve such a beautiful, humble happiness over the years. Once they're ready to have children, however, it appears that sadly, fate would dictate otherwise. For one reason or another, they're unable to have children. From this point, they shift their focus to their childhood dreams of making it to Paradise Falls. But once again, life gets in the way. Whether it's a new tire or a literal tree falling on their house, as time goes on, they lose sight of this goal. They are shown to both be working at the local zoo, Carl selling balloons, and Ellie manning the Peru section. As many years go by, I really like the way that they handled the time skip here, as it showed how their plain routine and passionate love continued into their old age. I mean, do you see the way she looks at him? Goddamn. Carl is reminded one day of his promise to take her to Paradise Falls, and spontaneously decides to surprise her with a trip. But Ellie falls ill before he can do so. She passes in the hospital, likely due to old age, and gives Carl her adventure book, symbolizing that her adventures are now over. Unfortunately, y'all are stuck listening to my voice talk over this clip, but the actual music does an amazing job at highlighting the light, bubbly vibe of new love before transitioning into a more somber, tragic tone once Ellie falls ill. The married life clip serves as the primary exposition for the movie Up, acting almost like a mini prequel, and sets up how Carl became a crotchety old man who clings deeply to the house that he and his wife loved. It's truly one of the most elegant ways I've seen background information be given to the viewer, and it accomplishes several crucial plot setups in a very efficient manner. First is the relationship that Carl and Ellie had. Rather than just tell us directly through on-screen dialogue or show Carl as already an old man reminiscing through photos or something, the married life clip establishes everything we need to know about the strength of their bond without them saying a single thing to each other. We can interpret this through the body language and the things they spend money on, and the way that the house itself evolved throughout the years to grow besides them. This also establishes why the house means so much to Carl later in the movie, as it's not just the place that they lived in together, but also proof that Ellie's spirit was not gone from the home, as it lived on through the personality she added throughout the years. This is the impetus for the entire film, and why Carl is so desperate to get the house to Paradise Falls. Because not only does he want to fulfill his promise, he also now conflates the house with the spirit of Ellie and wants to complete this wish for her. Second is establishing the reason Carl never had any children. It's shown that this was not the choice that they would have liked to have made, but one that they inevitably accepted after trying to have a child and not being able to. As a kid, I personally didn't exactly get this scene, because hell, I didn't understand how babies were born back then, but it was clear that the couple was excited for the thought of having children, and medically, this became impossible. Still, Carl and Ellie are able to move forward and have a happy life together, despite their lack of children. This is an important setup for the introduction of Russell, who represents the kind of relationship that Carl never got to experience in the past by being a father figure to him. We're just going to ignore the fact that Carl basically kidnaps and endangers Russell in the wilds of Peru, but hey, I'm not his mom. Finally, it sets the scene for the current starting point of the story, not as the typical young boy yearning for adventure that we expect when we're first introduced to Carl in the prologue, but instead as this old, bereaving man who, for all intents and purposes, should not be going on anything close to a wildly physical escapade through the unknown jungles of Peru. That's what makes it tie into the themes of the movie so well though. It shatters our preconceptions that only the young and free-spirited could seek out and enjoy adventure. Even though Russell comes along to represent this stereotypical role, it really is Carl's journey, and he starts to learn this very important lesson that there is so much more to experience even after he loses Ellie. There's literally another hour of movie that honestly feels a bit lackluster overall, but maybe that's just because the expectations were raised too high given the emotional rollercoaster we were just put through. In the present day where the main story takes place, we see that all the land around the house has been seized by a large developer, likely a case of eminent domain or corporate seizure, but he remains the last holdout, stubbornly hanging on to the last bastion of his wife's memory. Russell then appears as a good Samaritan, wilderness explorer, looking to help the elderly. That's you, Carl, and complete his senior qualifications. One small assault later, and Carl is on the run, using his balloon to literally lift his house into the sky, with the goal of setting down in Paradise Falls, with Russell stowing underneath the porch by accident. Now, actual physics aside, the rest of this journey is largely focused on three things. 1, staying alive. 2, getting the house to the spot Ellie envisioned in one piece. And 3, protecting Kevin. Kevin is the female bird that our antagonist Muntz has been hunting from the beginning of the movie, and has been for this entire time. Let's focus on how each character relates to the central themes displayed in the Married Life clip during the main story. Note that I'm going to focus on the thematically important characters in the movie, so I'll be ignoring Doug and the other dogs, even though they are adorable. First, Russell's role is mostly to act as a reflection of Carl himself, juxtaposing the childlike thirst for adventure and the youth to go along with it, with Carl as now an old man. This could be compared to Kid Carl, who once had that same spark of adventure that led him to Ellie in the first place. Russell offers Carl a window into what it would have been like to have a child himself, with the classic "Are we there yet?" jokes thrown in for good measure. While innocently inexperienced, Russell's not afraid to do the right thing despite his naivete, and this leads us to the secondary driving character of the story, Kevin. Kevin is apparently a rare animal found only in Paradise Falls, who develops a liking to Russell and the chocolate he carries with him in his backpack. Kevin is later revealed to be a mother bird, gathering food for her babies. This once again brings up the idea of fatherhood, as just like Russell's dad, they appear to be out of the picture. Carl is empathetic when he hears about Russell's longing to have his dad around more, and he's exposed once again to the idea of family, and making connections to people besides Ellie. Kevin begins to follow them around, but unbeknownst to them, Kevin is the monster that Muntz has been hunting for the past couple decades. Muntz is Carl's idol, and you know what they say about meeting your idols. In this case, however, Muntz is not a disappointing idol, but instead has understandably gone a little mad, all alone in the forest with only his talking dogs to keep him company. Muntz is supposed to represent the pure spirit of adventure, an inspiration for others who seek it out, but somewhere along the way, his drive consumed him, and he no longer cared who had to get hurt in order to get what he wanted. This is the ideal taken way too far, where forsaking everything just to prove a point will ultimately only lead to a wasted life. Lastly, let's retouch on the most important character of the film, the house. Yep, I mean it. Mostly because you could argue that Ellie and the house are now synonymous at this point, and this explains why Carl does everything in his power to try and keep the house safe. During the storm, he tried to save every piece of physical memorabilia associated with Ellie that he could, and later even went so far as to abandon Kevin to Muntz in order to protect it. This shows Carl's fatal flaw, his attachment to his wife at the expense of the lives in front of him now. As we'll talk about in a second, the message here is not that he should let go of his wife completely and just move on like she didn't matter, but that there are other important connections he will end up sacrificing if he continues to stay attached to her memory as fanatically as Charles Muntz did with catching Kevin. Overall, like I said, I do have some issues with characters like Russell and Muntz. To go over it quickly, Russell feels way too flat given the level of depth we get for Carl's backstory. It really feels like his ignorance and overly good-hearted nature made for a forgettable character, and it felt like even if Russell wasn't in the movie, the film could have still worked for the most part, and that to me is a giant red flag for characterization. Similarly with Muntz, we have to suspend a lot of belief to believe his backstory. For one thing, I don't really understand how Muntz is still alive, given that we're led to believe that Carl is old enough to be thrown into a retirement home, and Muntz was quite a bit older than Kid Carl. It's also hard to accept that this genius inventor couldn't catch Kevin for this long and relied on his pack of talking dogs for the most part, instead of any better traps he could with all the technology he had. And even when seeing the floating house, Muntz is crazy enough to think that it's just a cover story for stealing the bird from him. On this note, if he didn't believe in their cover story, why does he think that burning the house here would stop Carl from saving Kevin in this scene? I mean, logically it has to be one or the other, right? Either he doesn't believe in them and thinks that they're after the bird, in which case burning the house would do nothing, or he does believe them and thinks they're just here to put the house on top of the falls, and in that case, why wouldn't he just have threatened to destroy the house earlier to prevent them from moving against him in the first place? To be clear though, I do think the main plot of the movie has the same general value that the married life clips do, just that the condensed scenes accomplish this a whole lot better. If this was a full critique though, man, I'd be saying some things about everyone except for Carl, but never mind that. The part I'd like to focus on here is the aftermath of Kevin's capture, when Carl manages to get the house to the right spot, accomplishing the supposed goal of the adventure. However, this victory feels overwhelmingly hollow, as he reflects on his actions along the way. This speechless scene, which is included as part of the 14 minutes I mentioned at the top of the video, is the crucial conclusion to the whole storyline. Here he sits down one last time in his chair next to Ellie's empty one, flipping through her adventure book. As he gets to the page marked "Stuff I'm Gonna Do," he's reminded once again that he was unable to take her to Paradise Falls to fill up all those pages, taking the blame for not making good on their promise. As he prepares to close the book, however, he sees, probably for the first time, that Ellie has actually added a picture to this section. In fact, as Carl continues to flip through pages, we see she has added many pictures of their life together, a message to Carl that he had given her the most precious adventure she could have asked for. Her final note expressing to him that things don't have to end just because she's gone, and encourages him to continue having new adventures with the life that he still has. This is an important message for anyone who has lost a loved one, that there is always the chance to make new memories and have new experiences, even when everything feels meaningless without them. When he goes out again, empowered to try and help save Kevin, he finds that Russell is determined to save Kevin on his own, even without Carl's help. Carl tries in vain to get the house to take off again to follow suit, but too much buoyancy has been lost. He realizes that the only way to get airborne is to start dumping the heavy furniture inside the house to reduce its weight. This is the turning point of his emotional turmoil. When he previously tried to hold on to her memory, aka the house, over the present, we see how this ultimately led to an empty, hollow shell that remained without her spirit. When he starts throwing all the furniture out though, we ironically get to see the opposite. He's letting go of the physical ties he has to the house and to her, and instead keeps her spirit alive, her adventurous soul, and the hope that Carl would continue to live out his life to the fullest even without her. This allows Carl to soar, both metaphorically and literally, back into the sky to rescue Kevin and Russell from Muntz. After a few old man shenanigans, of course. Ultimately, he sacrifices the house in order to save them, acknowledging that it was just a house at the end of the day and that the gang mattered more to him than that. Happily, in a serendipitous turn of events, the house still finds its way right back to the top of the cliff where Ellie imagined it, completing their adventure with a satisfying ending. In the closing scenes of the movie, Russell earns his final badge, the Ellie badge, and graduates to Senior Wilderness Explorer. All of this feels a bit underwhelming given the life or death adventure we just had, but I think that's sort of part of the charm of the movie. Not every adventure needs to be a nail-biting encounter with extreme danger. It could be something as simple as assisting the elderly or sitting on the curb and counting cars as they go by. On a separate note here, I really want to hear how Carl explained all this to Russell's mom for her to be okay with him showing up at the badge ceremony the way he did, because in my head, there's no good explanation for kidnapping a kid for days and then showing up in a giant blimp. Maybe there is a reason his dad left. Just kidding, just kidding. In all seriousness though, the full married life scenes create an earthly, relatable story of genuine love that draws us in immediately. We watch the very realistic progression of a happy couple who go through their entire lives together. And while it's easy to think that marriage can be unintentionally holding us back from achieving our original dreams, in reality, the marriage itself can be a beautiful adventure that in this case, Ellie got to share thanks to Carl. Her message to him is the message of up. Enjoy every adventure to its fullest and be thankful for the adventures you had along the way, even if you didn't realize you were on one at a time. Even without the rest of the movie, I think those 14 minutes give us plenty of food for thought, and I hope you appreciate the brilliance of those scenes as much as I do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and keep an eye out for more.